All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for showing up. And let's get started here. I'm Tony Rucci, and here's a little bit of background on me. Maybe y'all have heard me talk before. I'm a retired counterintelligence special agent, and I kind of grew up in the intelligence community, running computer crimes investigations for a good part of my career, and retired in 2004, went out to work at Oak Ridge National Lab. And 2011, was recruited to go out to Reno, Nevada to go build some data centers out there. And after we stood them up, I stepped away and began starting some companies in the commercial space out there. Well, I found very quickly that a lot of folks are, focused on keeping the lights on the day-to-day operations. And one of the things that they used to ask me about all the time is, hey, can you come out and give us a look, kind of a walk down our stack and give us a security look, another set of eyes. And so that really stood up a couple of sectors of business for me. And as a result, I kind of transitioned a lot of that military training in the government space into commercial sector, and especially these days with ransomware and data breaches kind of running off the charts. It's one of those things that, it's not going away. While a lot of people have been out of work, there's many of us in the InfoSec community and especially the incident responder side of it have been, busier than ever. So let's get right into it and take a look kind of what, everybody has their media sources and the news that you look at these days. And people think about when they have the security education awareness, they start talking about their email, really focusing on your email and watch the links in your email and your embedded email. But one of the things that's transitioning, and it's been transitioning for a while, is where do you read your news? You're either reading it online or your portable or your mobile devices and that type of thing. But in a lot of cases, we're reading it online and watching web-based news. And how easy is that to manipulate that traffic, especially if somebody's in close proximity to you, to do like a man-in-the-middle attack and be able to manipulate that traffic and put something there in the headline that's attractive to you, and I know you're going to click on it if it's something that's relevant to you. So everybody has their own media of choice for social media. Some people like to watch videos. You're watching, your news through very specific apps. If you've got children in school, you might have an app that's provided by the school and the staff. A lot of cases, everybody's ordering from online services these days, so you're waiting for that next package coming in from Amazon. It's pretty simplistic to create that link and put it in a message to you, and there's a good chance you're going to click that. And if that mobile device happens to be connected to your domain, then it's game over in a lot of cases. It's just like clicking that email link within those environments. So this day and age, we equate ransomware to the coronavirus in your network. You have to ask yourself a few questions. Is your network really ready for a ransomware attack? I guess the real question is, can you recover your network from a ransomware attack, especially if you're the defender yourself? One of the challenges being able to defend that and recover it. And we always ask, one of the first questions that I always ask, well, the first two questions when I get called out on an incident is, do you have onboard IT staff or are they outsourced? And what's your recovery strategy look like? Do you have a recovery plan, and are you able to recover? A lot of cases they don't really know if they can recover because they've never exercised it. So we ask them, have you ever exercised your cyber incident response plan? And then that's when you get the sucking teeth in a lot of cases. It's either the answer is going to be no, or yeah, we're kind of building in that direction, but yeah, we really haven't gotten there yet. We're working on that. Well, it's too late when you're still working on that. And the reality is, in a lot of cases, they don't even know what the hell it is. And then that's the day that that you're probably going to be negotiating with somebody if down the road if they have been compromised with ransomware. So that's one of those types of moments, and it's the aha moment, early on. Excuse me. Now, one of the things to consider is the type of ransomware that's compromised the network as well, because there's a few families of ransomware that I've dealt with, and just since Thanksgiving, I've dealt with about 6 or 7 cases specifically, and on 3 occasions, Phobos ransomware, which comes under the Dharma family, is one of those unique varieties of ransomware where it has a nasty habit of, well, a favorable habit for us of failing midstream. And so it doesn't do full encryption. It doesn't continuously overwrite the data that it's deleted. So as it encrypts the top layer of the files, you can, in a lot of cases, go in and do like a forensics recovery if you've overwritten data or if you've deleted data in the past, and trying to recover that data from the raw drive. And I'll talk about that a bit. And I'm going to kind of mix 2 different cases. I know in the bio there I said that I was going to talk about a specific case, but I'm going to talk about 2 of them. One was with regards to Phobos, and then another one here that is pretty unique in and of itself here that we'll talk about. But that's something to always consider, and we'll talk about recovery in just a little bit. But for those attackers out there, some are much more disciplined, and they have their attack teams, and then they do this as a business. Ransomware as a service is out there. Well, ransomware as a service heads up dashboards and command and control centers. They can be purchased for $400. Anybody can go out there in the darknet and purchase Philadelphia. And if you're familiar with any kind of sales management or CMS dashboards, it's very Salesforce-like. You can track who your victims are. You can build your attack platforms. You can attack specific type of systems. You can keep track of them globally where they are, and it gives you a lot of heads-up information in there. One of the things with regards to Philadelphia and a few others, I think is pretty interesting, that there's the Give Mercy button there. If you look at it down in the bottom about 7 o'clock. So if somebody gives you a good enough story to the attacker, they're gonna be able to just go ahead and hit that button and give you your decryption keys back, or send you to a link where you can download those keys. So it's kind of feature rich, right, if you might say. Jokeroo is another C2 here that is been in the news, and it's been used quite a bit lately. It just has a few more features than Philadelphia, but it's just a straightforward navigation. You can just walk right down. It's very intuitive. You don't have to have a lot of skill or training in it. That's the scary thing, is because a lot of these folks who are hitting companies, especially on the small to medium scale, they don't have a lot of training. And so if they screw something up in your network, or if you piss them off, or they get pissed off themselves just out of pure anxiety, they walk away, and you're not getting your data back if you've got no way to recover yourself. And so it's extremely important to manage the conversation. And we'll talk about that in pretty good detail in just a second. There's a few more shots of Jokeroo. You kind of look at, here's the victims list there. It gives you a nice heads up display of your victims themselves. And then, hey, there's my reporting page. So I can see who has what and how I want to report that activity out. Maybe I've got to report to my seniors because I'm just a field agent out there, and I need to keep on task, right? I'm tier 1. And then here's your attack builder. If you want to go ahead and build a campaign, it's just like if you have like the Know Before or Fish Me or whatever those other campaign builders are. It's the same type of thing. You build your campaigns of attack against your targets. So you have to think about kind of your victim management and do's and don'ts there. When I get called out for an incident response and somebody calls up and it's usually the first conversation is extreme. They're in extreme peril, and this is the worst day in a company's life in a lot of cases, because they've invested so much in their keeping their business operating or making it successful, and then now all of a sudden they just watched everything go sideways overnight. They come in after a long weekend, a long holiday, and that's usually when those calls come in over Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July, or whatever that long holiday might be. That's when these things seem to happen. But remember that whenever you're negotiating with an attacker or any of the conversations, you're acting on the behalf of your client. So you can't have a holier than thou type of attitude, and you need to make sure that if the client doesn't already have a Bitcoin account, you may already have one if you're an InfoSec professional, and you may already have one that you may be willing to offer up the account to do the transaction. But in some cases it's a liability, and they don't want that. We've got to keep it and maintain it within our own sector, so we've got to build the account themselves. So that's something very important. We'll talk about the account itself, because you don't just stand up a Bitcoin account overnight, and you don't just stand up an account tonight and then throw money in it this afternoon and then expect to transact $50,000 tomorrow. It doesn't work that way in most cases. And in some cases, you're going to get these ransom notes that says you have 48 hours to respond and act and move money. And that's an indicator for you whether or not you're dealing with a mature organization or some script kiddie out there who may have just downloaded and spent his allowance on a $400 piece of software. I'll let you kind of look through that. We're going to walk through each one of these here, but it's important that you pay attention to these. And I'm going to have this whole slide deck available to you at the end as well. I'll drop it in my my instance there. But no matter what happens with the engagement, one of the questions that's always asked from the client is, all right, so if I pay this, we're definitely getting our keys back, right? And the answer is, maybe, maybe not. These days, in most of the cases that I worked, it's high probability that it's upwards of mid 90s % that you're getting the credentials back, or the decryption keys back in whatever form that is. This day and age, it's almost like they have a Yelp, in the underworld, where they've got to keep up their Yelp rating, because when you do your research and you find out who it is who may be attacking you, you kind of know whether or not you're going to get them back by the time you pull that trigger. But we'll talk about that as we kind of roll along here. So getting back to the Bitcoin account setup, as a few folks have already asked, setting up Bitcoin account, am I setting up an individual account, or am I setting up a business account? Does it make a difference? It does, because the way you set it up allows you to move money quicker, and you have forms of identity that you can provide that you can validate yourself. The pure essence of cryptocurrency is the anonymity in a lot of cases. But in these types of incidents, you're not going to have all that level of anonymity if you need to set it up quickly, because you need to provide some form of federal ID or something like that in a lot of cases, depending on which service you decide to set up an account. And so those are things that all take in consideration. And I've got a little Bitcoin 101 that I'm going to add to the deck there at the end of it, along with these right here as well. But you pick your exchange of choice. Coinbase is an example there. One of the things that you can do, you can put credit card, attach that to the account, and you can move money almost immediately. But you can only move a little bit of money at a time, and you have to kind of build the trust with them, and you have to you can level up, if you will. I'll show that at the next slide. But it's important to point out, but if you do bank transfers, yeah, I can move a whole lot of money with a bank transfer, $50,000. I can move that tonight, but that money is going to sit there just like if I moved $50,000 into a bank account, I really can't touch it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days, depending on where that is. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as you start a talk like this, that's when the phone rings. It's either the phone or the dogs in most cases. But so those are things that you need to take time and research and help educate them as well, because the leveling up is extremely important. In a lot of cases, you're dealing with, maybe they have been hit with a 2 Bitcoin ransom or something like that, and you can negotiate those things down. But in some cases, you're dealing with, $1 million, and that might be extremely challenging in a lot of cases. So those are things to take into consideration. And so you can see by the time you level up into level 3, which may take a bit of time, so you can encourage them to use your account or use another organization's account that already has one, or if you've got a relationship with them already, and that's something that they're concerned about, have that conversation now and say, hey, you might want to go ahead and set up an account and just move some money back and forth, and then begin establishing the bona fides with that exchange. That way, if the time does come, because it's quite possible that their time is going to come, and then it all boils down to how fast they can move it to be able to respond and keep those numbers down. I guess the big takeaway there is at the end. We already reinforced that a few times. So here's an example of the Phobos Splash Screen, and it's in the info.txt file that's dropped usually in the C drive or somewhere in the root, and it's dropped in a bunch of different places on a machine once it's been compromised. But kind of walking through that tells you a lot, because most cases you're going to see this just as a copy and paste template, and they'll just change the header information, their primary, secondary email, and the reference ID. It's their reference ID, and and it's a dash, and then your usually a 4 to 6 digit reference ID, and that's you as the victim, and that's what you put in all the headers back to the emails back to them. So it gives you a little bit of instruction there. And here's some of your proof of life opportunity here. They're already telling you, hey, we want to show you that we can decrypt your data. It's important to make sure that you leverage that and take advantage of that. If a time comes when you have that conversation with them, that you want to go ahead and send them a couple of mundane files that have been encrypted first, to have them prove to you that they can compromise, or that they can decrypt those files and return those to you. And then this is an important statement here about how to obtain the Bitcoins. This is where you can really determine the maturity in a lot of cases of the organization. And you can tell whether or not they're seasoned, they know what they're doing. The verbiage in here is very straightforward and standard. They won't try to rush you. They won't try to throw any idle threats in here, but this is one of those ones that they, those blocks right here where they'll throw in there that you've only got 48 hours to stand up a Bitcoin account and money needs to be there. Or we're going to start doubling it every 24 hours after that. No delays, and they'll try to throw all the anxiety and stress on you. That's what really flips people out, but that's also an indicator that somebody's really doesn't know what they're doing, because they don't realize and take time to sit back and think. The other indicator is secondary communications. While you've got a couple of email accounts up there that you can use and leverage, you also have a Jabber client in here, and I'll show you another communications client in the other splash screen here in a second. But that is more useful than the email, because email, you're dealing with time zones and things like that all the time, and you're not going to get a whole lot of sleep while you're doing this, because you have to operate on their time zones in most cases to maximize your communication. And you don't want to let communications lag, and you don't want to let them go to sleep, because they're dealing with lots of victims at a time, and you don't want them to put you at the bottom of their priority stack. Once you finally do get your act together and you are ready to transact funds on behalf of a client. And the last one there is just, I think it's kind of cute. in here. They're giving you a little heads up, a little security awareness on how not to further damage your files. One of the interesting things is a lot of cases, you're able to take those files off of a hard drive and drop them onto a virtual space and still recover them. So it's kind of a moot point, but it is pretty interesting. Now here's a BitPaymer Splash Screen, and it's a little bit different because when you hit the screen and it pops up, it shows you exactly what you are going to owe them. Coming back to the Phobos, you'll notice in there you don't know how much you owe them yet. You won't. The clock really won't start ticking for you until you reach out to one of those email addresses up top and you tell them, hey, I got this on my computer and it said to reach out to you. How much do I owe you? Or, you know, what do I need to do? You know, you kind of play it dumb, and we'll talk about that in the back and forth in the messaging. But BitPaymer is one where it shows you exactly how much they're demanding right up front. It gives you their wallet information. It shows you your reference ID, and you put that in the email to them. You go out to their wallet, and you can verify that that wallet is active, and they're just waiting for you to drop money in there. In this instance here, they're asking for 10 Bitcoin, and here's my contact email. So you can also email me, or you can use that chat in the very bottom right corner on that first half of the pane. That proves to be probably the most effective form of communications that you'll use. Emails are great, but the online chat is extremely useful in these cases, especially when you get an idea of, you know, the time differential. Are they 4 hours, 6 hours in front of you? You know, when do they answer the first time usually? And when's the last time you hear from them? You can start putting that association matrix together as to where they might be regionally, and then you can pull a lot of it out of their vernacular as well. For me, I like to, you know, keep a lot of screens heads up on my machine when I'm having any kind of conversation, even if I'm just having a conversation with them, because I want to make sure that my VPN's not down. And you know, using encrypted browser is a good idea, obviously, and it just creates another layer of protection for you, because here I'm using my machine. I might be at home, or I might be on client side at my hotel, or wherever that might be, but I don't want to give away any kind of detail about me if I don't have to in any of those machines. And so you know, keeping up their blockchain, I like to look at their wallet as well to see if they're also receiving transactions elsewhere. Are they getting a whole lot of money running in there, and all of a sudden, you know, they're only looking for a few Bitcoins from me, but I'm watching, you know, 150 Bitcoins transact through this wallet a day. You know, these folks don't need my money, but how bad does the client need their data back, and those types of things. And so, or, you know, are they asking me for 1 Bitcoin and I don't watch any money transact that? There's 2 reasons why. Either they're, you know, they stood that, you know, wallet up today, and you can verify, you know, when it was stood up. And, you know, if they're smart, they're only using 1 wallet per victim, and they spin up another wallet for each one of their victims. But they might be dealing with, you know, 20 or 30 victims at any given time. So, you know, again, it all depends, and every one of them seems to be a little bit different. And then I have a working browser in there where I can do some, you know, heads up research without having to jump screens and things like that around there. So when you send out in that Phobos message and you send that email back out to them, you get that first response back, and it tells them that's when it tells you, hey, I've decrypted all your files. You need to pay 1.8 Bitcoins. In this instance here, this was just a couple months ago, where that was about $12,000 at the time at the current exchange rate. $12,063, I think is what it was. And then it gives you all the instructions all the way down the line. In the very bottom, you can see the email that I sent to them. It's very straightforward, very professional. Remember, it's a business transaction. It's business to them. You don't need to play games. You don't want to, you know, use a lot of slang and street slang and things like that, and try to, you know, Google leet speak, because that's not who you're dealing with in most cases. You know, you want to do some research, in the background. You've got somebody in your team that's either yourself or somebody else who's skilled in forensics. You want to be able to start pulling some data off of there, looking at indicators of compromise, and see what you're dealing with, and make sure that you actually do have a specific family or variety of ransomware, as opposed to having a false indicator, or somebody just is playing games with you and has messed around with your machine and then drops an index file in there like that, which has happened in the past, and it really scares the hell out of people. So you're looking at, and it's very clear when you drop them into places like VirusTotal, or you can go to AnyRun, and you can drop one of those executables or even the binary into a Windows machine and watch that thing spin up and watch what happens. It's a great demonstration platform, and you can do this if you don't have your own capabilities in your own environment, or you're anxious about doing that and spinning up a virtual machine and watching it blow up. You can do that yourself right there online and drop it into an environment like that. So it's a great resource to have bookmarked. So that was, coming back to that business transaction. That was my email back to them. You spin up either FireMail, Proton, whatever, any kind of account, a burner account that you can use for that instance. And I'm one of them for that sake of that discussion. Remember, the first conversation you have with that client is going to be, there's absolutely no way that I'm paying a ransom on here. So we got to do everything that we can do. Well, when you start running down that whole chain of events with them, and you say, look, do you have any way of being able to recover that data? Do you have any backups local? Do you have them in the cloud? Is there any possible way? And you've exhausted all those resources, then you start having that math conversation with the C-suite of how much would it cost you to reconstitute and rebuild all of that critical data that you lost, because you don't need everything, you just need the critical nuggets. How much would it cost you? And if that number is more than what that ransom is, then you start having to have that next conversation with, well, it might be logistically and economically better for you to maybe pay that, take your chances, and recover that data. Then we scrub it, we carve it off, and then we blow up all your instances of your active environment that was compromised, and you either replace drives or machines if they're completely dead in the water, and that type of thing. So you had those conversations, but it takes you back to this point here when, okay, you've gone through all that entire exercise. Yes, it is necessary for us to go ahead and do that. We received that response back from them, and now the clock starts ticking when you're dealing with something like Phobos, where you've now learned the destiny and how much it's going to cost. Then you go back to them. Is this something you can deal with? It's almost like going to a flea market. You can almost always ask for half at a minimum, and in most cases, as long as you're keeping that conversation alive. I like to play the poor country boy type of conversation with a lot of them, and we're just you'll see some of my conversations in here. We're just a poor rural school. We're just trying to look out for the kids and that type of thing. But as you get down to the conversation here, you say, well, all right, we're thinking about it. I've talked to the leadership. In the meantime, you want to keep that conversation alive. Now the clock is ticking with them. So this is the time that you want to go ahead and throw them some files, and you send them some files that doesn't have any kind of critical data in it. You don't want to send them your password list, so now I can get into all my systems because the IT guy, is AWOL. But you want to send them those files, and then they're going to send them back to you. In most cases, they send you a link. And I like this one here because this was a pretty interesting password that they chose. They believe in strong passwords. We always kid around, when we find some botnets out there, something like that. They don't even protect the botnets themselves, and they've got a default password in their infrastructure a lot of times. But when they choose a password like that, maybe they thought we were just a poor bumpkin company, at the time, but I don't think that's the case. You'll see in a moment. So comes back to the don't play games with them. You know, here's one instance where, you know, I'm just telling them we're a small, you know, management company, and you know, this is where they were asking for 1.8 you know, Bitcoin, which is $12,000, and they did have a rule with their board members that the general manager could not spend anything more than $5,000 without calling together a board meeting and for them to vote on it. And so rather than having to call up an emergency board meeting to go through that whole thing, he's like, hey, let's go ahead and just put that back to them and offer it up and see what they say. And so when we did that, they did say, hey, yeah, you know what, we'll take $5,500 is the least amount that we can take. And, you know, and then you start going on from there. And you can see, I tried playing the whole, you know, poor us, you know, look at our small handful of employees here. We're a small development. They rely on us to be up and operating, and, you know, kind of play the old, come on, do it for the kids. And I even threw the COVID in there. But, you know, we still ended up. Now, on the other side, this is one where I may have taken a little bit of a heavy hand with them and saying, hey, you know, it's unfortunate you've mistaken us for a large corporation. You know, that's maybe wasn't the right way to go. Well, it clearly wasn't the right way to go. We're a rural school, and they did hit a school district. It was a pretty big school district. And you can see the rest of it. I won't read it to you verbatim. But, you know, I tried playing it down. Hey, we're just real small. We just want to make sure that we focus on the kids in this rural town. And their response back was an email with an attachment that had the financials from the previous year, you know, letting them know, look, I was in your system. I know how much your budget is. I know how much your expenditures were. And it's just a drop in the bucket for what I'm asking you here. And we did end up negotiating it down. They asked for 10, and they agreed on 3. I went back to them after we got that message back, and I said, hey, can we please discuss it? And this is where we're in that chat window, and you catch them online. You just keep it going back and forth with them. And you know, he said, hey, you said to reach out to you, discuss the price. And I've still kind of played that we're still small. And he was just very matter of fact. So what's your offer? Yeah, I don't care about all the sob story. What's your offer? And, you know, this is what I stalled for a little bit more time with them and say, hey, I can't make a legitimate offer without going to the board. He said, so discuss it and then, you know, do it. Well, we were rolling into the 4th of July weekend at that time. So he said, all right, you've got until Monday. So we did buy a little bit more time in that instance. And one of the things important is to keep that conversation alive. So every day I sent them at least 2 messages just to let them know, hey, just to let you know, we're still working it, and I'm waiting on the board, and hopefully they're gonna be able to find everybody and pull them all together, and we're gonna get a decision even sooner than we had expected. And so we kind of kept that going, and finally I told them, I said, hey, I've been offered, granted approved to offer you 1 Bitcoin, and still trying to beg and plead. And you have to swallow your pride in a lot of cases, because you're, you know, here I am, a grown man, trying to beg and plead for mercy. And you feel like, you know, geez, I feel like I'm just, you know, cowering down to them in a lot of cases. But remember, you're doing this on behalf of an entire community or whoever that client is at the time. And so you can see the response back and forth in there. One of the things that I'd ask, and it's not captured on this, is can you take a smaller amount right now and give us encryption keys for just a few of the machines, because it's really important we get payroll and that whole 9 yards. And then you can, you know, when we can get the rest of the money, we can pay out the rest of it. Then you can give us another key to give us the rest of the data. That's where he was explaining, no, it's 1 key decrypts everything. So it's a one and done kind of deal. So you can see how that went. And then it's important not to make promises you can't keep. You can't say that, yep, okay, on Monday I'm going to move this money and it's going to definitely happen on that day. It's, you know, I'm going to try. We're going to attempt it. I always use the kind of the soft messaging, the passive voice that this is my first time. Hey, we don't do this very often. You know, we don't have a Bitcoin account. I don't even know what Bitcoin is before this all happened. And, you know, we finally got the money in the account, but it was being delayed because it was a new account stood up. And then, you know, so I asked them just to try to keep the conversation alive. Is this common? And, you know, so this is kind of coming back to the other case where we'll do our best to move that money, just kind of keeping it, you know, passive. But at the same time, it's not me doing this. It's us as a collective team, because I'm representing a large, you know, an organization. And so it's not just me. They didn't just hit a single person, and that way they'd understand that they're not just dealing with one person. I don't have decision-making authority. And so I always try to put it in that we versus I. You know, you hit me, you put me in this predicament. It's us and we type of thing. So you get to the point where you've been watching your heads up display, and you finally transact that money. It drops into their account. You watch their wallet transact the funds, and then it populates with, you know, whatever the volume was. This is a response that you get with the BitPaymer, which is pretty interesting and comical from an investigator perspective, because at the end of the day, they're trying to help you protect your network further down the road. They try to tell you that they don't intend to come back or something like that, but they give you a little security awareness, but they also teach you how to run the tool itself. But the interesting piece is the very end, I've highlighted it there. They point you to Jim Shaver's Mimikatz blog post back in 2016, defending against Mimikatz. And so when you click on that, you end up jumping to Jim's page there, which is pretty interesting. Many of us have read it over the years. But you know, they're kind of giving you an exit security awareness briefing. Hey, knuckleheads, here's how I did it. In a lot of cases, you know, we find that Phobos's attack vector is through 3389 with OpenRDP, and that's where, you know, it's extremely important to stress to the folks, you know, hey, look, this is how we see that they got in, and it's important to be able to capture, you know, a lot of that perimeter information, like the logs and all that traffic like that, because one of the questions that the board members or any of the investors or any of the C-suites are going to ask, was this an inside job, or did somebody hit us from the outside? How did they get in? What happened? And they want to know the full forensic story of what happened, and did anything exfiltrate my perimeter? And that's, you know, where you can or you can't answer the question depending on what available information you have, because the last act that an attacker is going to do before they exfiltrate your system is they're going to delete any logs, and they're going to pick up all the crumbs that they can on the way out. And so they delete a lot of those logs, and in a lot of cases, because you're encrypted and you're full disk encryption now, in a lot of cases you don't have the ability to recover that. So it's hit and miss, and especially if they, you know, are hit you at your edge and you didn't have an independent firewall. In a lot of cases, a lot of these small to medium-sized businesses, is not the case. You know, I had a server and it had some firewall logging. My printer's got firewall on it, so I was probably okay, right? You can see where they're standing. So it's extremely important to be able to pull that forensics information for them to be able to do that analysis, to say, you can't say to your investors that nothing left our perimeter. So that transitions, you know, to the type of conversation when they go public. And it's extremely important for them to be transparent with regards to what's happened. And the last thing they want to do is lie intentionally, you know, withholding some of that information, because we all know that first report's always wrong. And it's just, you know, what's that second report going to hold? Is it going to be 180 degrees on that story? This is just kind of Tony's joy in all this. Well, as a hunter and as an investigator, I like to know where this money is going, and I try to chase that money as long as I can after the transactions has been made. And that's part of why I keep that wallet up, because you can chase the trail to a certain degree. And you can see in this instance here where our wallet makes the payment to the attacker, and then the attacker starts breaking that up right away, and he starts carving that money up, and he's breaking it into 2.24, then 0.75, and then each of those start running down their trails, and they're either paying out or they're washing it, a little bit of both, but they'll start kind of laundering or blending that money so that it's obfuscated a little bit deeper in case Secret Service or anybody else is trying to track them hard. But in most cases, they're paying out anybody that's on their team, and that's usually that smaller bucket on there where they're paying people out. And then you can chase those trails down as far as you go, and then you finally lose track of them. So it's difficult at best, and there's a lot of folks who just, when you lock on to a wallet, they want you to throw them the wallet, and they'll do all that in the background. You can't eat up your time, hunting and chasing that down the road. But here's kind of a blow up, if you couldn't see it very well on your screen, of that larger transaction and that larger slice as they were beginning to blow it out. So once you've got your money transacted and you've got the keys now, then you start, depending on the type of decryption tools that you ransomware that you have, you begin decrypting it. Your conversation with the attacker in a lot of cases isn't over. You have to maintain comms with them, because in some instances you receive a file, you download it, and you execute it on the encrypted files or the machine, and you're done. You're done conversation with them. In the case of Phobos, that's not the case. You end up having to run, and I'll kind of walk you through. You run the tool on the respective drive, and you just scroll to the drive, and you're either looking at a directory, or you're just doing a full disk itself, and drop it in here, and you're scanning it. And then what it does is it drops a hash back to you. Well, let me back up here, and you email that hash back to the attacker, and then they send you another hash for the decryption, and you pick that hash up at their drop site. And then once you receive that hash, you drop it back into the tool, and then you decrypt that specific instance in that machine. Every machine has its own unique signature that you have to do. So if you got an entire instance in a company that's got 100 machines, you're doing this transaction with Phobos 100 times. So that's why it's important to segment out, hey, where's my critical data? Is it just my financial server? Is it my core server? Do I need to hit all of my end user machines? Do I have the ability to do that? Do I care? So you really have to have those conversations, because that can really be time consuming. Because once you let that conversation die for a half a day or a day, they're gone, and they're not coming back. They've already got their money. There's no priority for them to make sure that you're taking care of cleaning house. And speaking of cleaning house, once you've gone into that server and you pull off of that, or that machine that's got that critical data, it's interesting a lot of times to see what is left there and which artifacts are left behind, and what value add or gifts they gave you. And you can see in this instance here, there's a variant of a Bitcoin miner that's left in there, even after all of the ransomware is removed through the decryptor. So it leaves a bit there, and that's why we always have that conversation with, well, I've decrypted it, I'm back to operations, thanks a lot, guys, go away. It's not that. Now you've got to go ahead and scrub that pertinent data off, and then you're starting over with fresh drives. In some instances, it's time to refresh your hardware as well, because that was legacy hardware anyway. It's that time to go ahead. If you're going to go through that effort, let's just go ahead and build out new instances, or let's just migrate you to the cloud or whatever that might be, depending on your deployment. But it's important to reach in there and clean that up and blow up those machines if they've got a little bit of a disciplined capability in there. A talk like this wouldn't be valuable unless, kind of what do we see in the horizon? Ransomware is going to continue to grow. It's not going away anytime soon, regardless of what you heard back in 2018 when they said, hey, 2019 is going to start fading away. Then you had that little downturn. It's almost like the corona, right? It's going to downturn, and then it's probably going to come back up for a lot of folks in some areas because they're getting out ahead of themselves. Well, we're already seeing a lot of the fileless attacks out there where you're not clicking on a PDF that's sent to you an email. It's happening with those apps that I talked to you up front about. And then you're also seeing instances where some of the teams are saying, look, if you play games and you refuse to pay, then we're going to dump your data out there in the public domain. And so doxing your victims is extremely important for the victims out there to understand when they ask that question, well, did they exfiltrate anything? It's highly likely that they have exfiltrated that data from your network already, because they wouldn't be able to dox you if that's not the case. So, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. They're already targeting, large financial institutions and hospitals, especially in these critical times. It's pathetic to see those types of things, but I've dealt with 3 cases alone just over the period that we've been, quasi quarantined, and that's not always the case when you're doing something like this. But the fact of the matter is, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And you're already seeing instances, even prior to the new year, of people dumping people's creds and access to their machines, as well as their internals out there. I think last week there was an instance where an Israeli group dumped a bunch of folks. Whoa, is that me? Oh,
is that your end of speech timer?
No, that was mine. Yeah, that was mine. No, I put my little heads up to myself over here so I didn't run over. Trying to be respectful of rush hour. I know everybody's got to drive home to the refrigerator.
Yeah, so, yeah, pretty much. I already made my way there.
So I'll leave you with this. If there's always those lists of here are the top things you need to be doing. Really, we're all doing MFA. We all should be thinking about it if you're not. But the reality is, if there's one thing that a company needs to invest their money in, is a 3-2-1 resilient backup and recovery strategy, and practice. Give the confidence to the IT teams, even when they've got an effective solution in place. If they haven't practiced it, there's an extreme amount of anxiety when they push that button the first time. And if you've been there, you can speak to it. It's extremely anxious for those folks out there. Everything else in there is just traditional, administrative housekeeping, good networking, security, and taking care of business. But with that, I'll let you guys get back to.
Well, hey Tony, we've got one question on the line for you. Have you had cases where you have made negotiations, sent the payment, and then received nothing from the attacker? How do you avoid the risk, or at least communicate it to the client, the risk that they might pay and not get anything?
That's a great question, and it's an upfront conversation, because as soon as you start having that conversation with them, that okay, we've determined that we can't recover your data. You don't have any backups. There's no way to rebuild this. It's very unique, one-off data, and there's no other way to get it back unless you reach out to who your attacker was and try to do this. Their question is usually, all right, so if I pay this, no matter what the price is, I'm guaranteed I'm going to get it back. And the answer is always, you can't guarantee anything in that. And so you have to make sure it's very clear to them, and they're not trying to hold you liable for that as well. It's a huge risk. You do see all over the press a lot of instances where they're not paid out, but I'll tell you, I've done this for quite a while, and it's in the mid 90s, low to mid 90s that they're paying out. And so it does happen, but it's a very rare occasion these days. That was more, 3-4 years ago. And you can usually tell by the time you get to that point that you're ready to transact funds if you're dealing with somebody who's mature organization or a kiddie who downloaded a piece of software.
And we have one other question. Just curious, have you dealt with an issue where the entire network and shared device were encrypted?
Yes. Yeah, and so that's those instances where you're not spinning anything up, and that's one of the conversations we have with a lot of folks on their NAS when we do assessments and pen tests is the make sure that your backup and storage is not binded to your domain in a lot of those cases because it's crawling the domain, and any of those domain attachments are being encrypted as well, even when you push them up into your offsite storage. And we're seeing those. So, in some cases, it's kind of comical because you'll see in the last pen test report that we got was that we got gigged on it because we didn't have it bound. Well, it's actually a good thing these days because it's giving you kind of a gap in some instances. But that's where you start rolling into all right, let's find those critical machines and let's try to do a forensic recovery of those machines, just like we might try to, do a disaster recovery for a drive that's crashed.
It looks like we have someone put in one more question. They're an inquisitive folk. So when is it better to refuse the payment, or is it never a good option?
You're talking about refuse,
refuse to pay the ransom.
So that's a great topic of discussion, and it turns into a heated discussion. So if you remember about November of last year, a bunch of mayors all across the country, and to date, I think it's well over 100 or something different mayors around the country have put together this letter, and they signed the letter saying that we will not pay ransomware under any circumstances. And I shot out to the mayor of a couple of cities that I do business with regularly, and I said, good luck with that, because I know what your network looks like, and you're gonna fail hard when it comes time to address that. Because if you can't recover, and I talk to these IT guys a lot of times, and they go, man, we think we have it, but we haven't exercised it. Well, let's sit down and exercise it. You've got to have the confidence and ability to recover that, and your IT team has to have the confidence in themselves, and to just arbitrarily say there's absolutely no way that we're going to pay it. It's tongue in cheek. You just have to say good luck with that, because you have to be willing to have that conversation. At least ask if you've got no other option, because what are you going to do?
And Tony, the masses are asking for your slide deck.
Yeah, I'm going to drop my slide deck on the link on the BSides talk there, so on the schedule. So I'll drop that in there shortly afterwards here.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming out and speaking with us.
Thank you guys for joining me on the talk here, and hope you enjoyed it, and don't hesitate to reach out.